Most people believe that monsters exist only in movies, books, and creepy stories shared online. Ghosts, demons, cursed creatures, ancient legends, none of it feels real. We laugh at those stories during the day, dismissing them as fiction created to scare people for entertainment. But when darkness falls and you're alone in a silent room, that confidence tends to fade. I used to be a skeptic too. My name is Ruslan. At the time of these events, I was 25 years old. I lived in the city, had a decent job, and was trying to build a future for myself. My parents and my younger sister, Liza, still lived in a small village where I grew up. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Then everything changed in a single morning. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. Half asleep, I reached for it and saw Liza's name on the screen. The moment I answered, I heard sobbing. Not ordinary crying, pure panic. Liza?
What's wrong?
For several seconds, she couldn't speak. She was crying so hard that her words came out broken and incomprehensible. Finally, she managed to say something that shattered my world. Mom and Dad are gone. I froze. My mind refused to process what I had just heard. What do you mean they're gone? There was a long silence. Then she explained. There had been an accident during the night. Neither of our parents survived. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I sat motionless on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. It didn't feel real. It felt like one of those nightmares you wake up from moments later. But this time, there was no waking up. Within hours, I was on my way to the village. The days that followed passed in a blur. Funerals, tears, condolences, silence, an empty house that no longer felt like home. Liza and I were left completely alone. After the funeral, I brought my sister back to the city with me. She was only 16. There was no way I was leaving her by herself. For a while, we barely spoke. Grief settled over us like a heavy fog. Liza spent most of her time locked in her room. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear her crying through the wall. I wasn't handling things much better. About a month after our parents died, the nightmares began. At first, they were ordinary enough. Death, darkness, strange creatures, being chased through endless shadows. But one night, everything changed. I found myself standing in a forest. Not a normal forest. The trees were enormous, stretching so high that their tops disappeared into darkness. The air felt heavy, unnatural. The entire place seemed wrong somehow. Then I heard a voice.
It was faint, old, whispering, calling my name. I turned around. No one was there. The voice came again, somewhere deeper in the woods. Without understanding why, I started walking toward it. That's when I saw the house. A small cabin stood alone in a clearing. The moment I looked at it, dread filled my chest. Every instinct told me to turn around and run. Yet my feet kept moving forward, step by step. As I approached the porch, the voice became clearer. This is a cursed place. The whisper drifted through the air. This is a filthy place. A chill crawled down my spine. This is where you will die. The words were followed by an old woman's laughter. It sounded dry and rotten, like bones scraping together. Then came a growl, a deep, unnatural growl, not from any animal I had ever heard. The cabin door suddenly burst open. A violent force threw me backward. I landed hard on the ground. Standing in the doorway was a figure. At first glance, it looked human, but only barely. Bright white light poured out from behind it, making the creature appear as nothing more than a dark silhouette. Slowly, it tilted its head. Then it spoke. "This is my house. The growl returned, louder this time, more aggressive. Fear rooted me to the spot. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream, and suddenly my body obeyed. I turned and ran. Branches whipped against my face, roots clawed at my feet. The forest blurred around me. I was certain the thing was chasing me. After what felt like forever, I stopped to catch my breath. And then something slashed my shoulder. A sharp, burning pain exploded through my left arm. I screamed and woke up. The room was dark. My heart pounded against my ribs. For several seconds, I couldn't tell whether I was awake or still dreaming. I grabbed my phone. 4:03 a.m. The nightmare was over, but the pain remained. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing heavily. The image of the cabin refused to leave my mind. The old woman, the creature, the words, "This is my house." For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen that place before. Somewhere, sometime, unable to sleep. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. Standing by the window, I watched the empty streets below. The city was still asleep. I told myself it was only a nightmare, a product of stress and grief, nothing more. Yet deep inside, another thought lingered, a thought I couldn't explain. What if it wasn't a dream? What if it was a warning? And at that moment, I had no idea that the worst was still ahead. The nightmare should have faded by morning. Most dreams do. You wake up, shake off the fear, and move on with your day. But this one stayed with me. The image of the forest haunted every thought. The cabin, the voice, the creature standing in the doorway. Most of all, those 4 words. This is my house. I spent the entire day distracted. At work, I couldn't focus on anything. Simple tasks felt exhausting. Several times, my manager had to repeat instructions because I wasn't paying attention. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cabin again. By evening, I was exhausted. Not physically, mentally. I just wanted a few hours of dreamless sleep. It wasn't what I got. When I arrived home, Liza was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked nervous. The moment I walked through the door, "You won't believe what happened today." I dropped my keys onto the counter. "What is it?" She hesitated. Then she said something that immediately caught my attention. One of our former neighbors from the village had visited the city earlier that day. During their conversation, the woman mentioned something strange. Several times over the past few weeks, she had heard noises coming from our parents' house. Footsteps, movement, doors opening and closing. At first, she assumed someone had broken in. Eventually, she reported it. A local officer inspected the property. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, nothing. Yet according to the officer, the interior was in terrible condition. Furniture had been moved, drawers were open, objects were scattered everywhere. And there was another detail, a smell, a horrible smell, rotten, almost unbearable, as though something had died inside the house. Liza tried to laugh it off, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Who would even go there?" she asked. "There isn't anything worth stealing." I thought about it for a moment, then I shrugged. "Probably a squatter." "What if it isn't?" I forced a smile. "Then maybe the neighbor imagined it." She didn't look convinced. Neither was I. That night, I made a suggestion. "Let's go there this weekend." "To the village?" "Yeah. Why?" "To see the house for ourselves." I leaned back in my chair. "If someone got inside, we'll find out. We'll clean the place up, spend a night there, maybe even have a barbecue." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. A real smile, not the fake ones she'd been forcing lately. "Seriously?" "Seriously." She nodded immediately. "Let's do it." For a few moments, things almost felt normal again. Later that night, I took a shower. The hot water helped ease some of the tension I'd been carrying for weeks. Then suddenly, pain shot through my shoulder. Sharp, intense. I flinched. At first, I thought I had pulled a muscle, but the pain kept growing. I stepped out of the shower and turned toward the mirror. Using my phone's camera, I looked at my left shoulder. My blood ran cold. There was a scratch. A long scratch. Fresh, red, angry looking, as if something with claws had dragged itself across my skin. I stared at it in disbelief. The exact same shoulder, the exact same place where the creature had struck me in the dream. For several seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't think. Then my mind desperately searched for explanations. Maybe I scratched myself. Maybe I bumped into something. Maybe it happened at work. But none of those explanations felt right. I would have noticed. Real, painful, impossible. A memory surfaced. The moment in the forest. The burning sensation. The creature attacking me. No, I shook my head. No, that's ridiculous. Dreams couldn't leave physical injuries. That wasn't possible. Was it? I barely slept. When I finally drifted off, the nightmare returned immediately. The forest, the darkness, the voice. This time something was different. The cabin no longer felt unfamiliar. The shape. The roof. The red door. The front porch. Suddenly I knew where I had seen it before. My parents' house. The house from my childhood. The house waiting for us in the village. The cabin and the house were the same. I felt sick. Slowly I approached the front door. The lights inside glowed warmly. And then I saw them. My mother, standing by the window, smiling. Behind her stood my father. For a moment I forgot everything. The nightmares, the fear, the impossible things happening around me. I ran toward the house, toward them, toward my family. I threw open the door and rushed inside. The house was empty. No furniture, no voices, no parents, nothing. I dropped to my knees. The grief I had spent months suppressing came crashing down all at once. Why? My voice echoed through the empty rooms. Why did you leave us? The silence felt endless. Then I heard breathing behind me. Slow, wet, close, very close. A voice whispered directly into my ear. Don't worry. Every muscle in my body locked up. You'll see them again soon. A laugh followed. Dry, ancient, rotten. I turned around. The old woman stood only a few feet away, and this time I saw her clearly. Her skin was covered in cuts. Dark fluid leaked from her eyes. She wore a torn red robe. Her mouth stretched into an impossible grin. Then she screamed. It was something far worse. Get out of my house. Something slammed into my back. The world exploded into darkness. I woke up gasping. The room was pitch black. Sweat covered my face. For several moments, I couldn't remember where I was. Then reality returned. My apartment, my room, the city. Just a dream. Except, when I went to the bathroom and checked my reflection, I discovered a new mark. A dark bruise, right in the center of my back. Exactly where the old woman had struck me. I stared at it for a long time, and for the first time, I stopped telling myself these were only nightmares. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Something was reaching me through my dreams, and whatever it was, it wanted me to come home.
After discovering the bruise on my back,
I stopped looking for logical explanations. There were only so many coincidences a person could accept before they became something else. A nightmare had left a scratch on my shoulder. Another had left a bruise. And both injuries appeared exactly where I had been attacked in my dreams. I didn't tell Liza. What could I possibly say?
hey,
I think something from my nightmares is physically hurting me while I sleep. She was already struggling enough. The last thing she needed was to think her older brother was losing his mind. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer to everything waited in our parents' house. The house from the dreams. The house hidden in the forest. The house the old woman claimed belonged to her. So we packed our bags and left for the village. The drive took several hours.
most of the journey passed in silence.
Liza listened to music through her headphones while staring out the window. I focused on the road.
But my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every mile brought us closer to the house, closer to whatever was waiting there. The further we drove from the city, the more uneasy I became. By the time the village appeared on the horizon, a knot had formed in my stomach. Something felt wrong.
Not dangerous exactly, just wrong.
Like walking into a room.
where an argument had happened moments earlier. The air itself seemed tense, watching, waiting. At some point during the drive, exhaustion finally caught up with me. For a few seconds, my eyes closed, and I found myself dreaming again. This time, I stood on a beach. Dark clouds covered the sky. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction. There was nobody around, no buildings, no trees, no signs of life. Just me and the ocean.
For a while,
Nothing happened. No monsters, no old woman, no cabin, only silence. Only silence. Then I felt a hand touch my shoulder. Warm, gentle. I spun around. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother. She looked exactly as I remembered her. Not injured, not dead, just Mom. Tears filled my eyes instantly. I wanted to hug her, to ask 1,000 questions, to tell her how much I missed her. But before I could speak, she leaned closer. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't go there." I stared at her. "What?" "Don't go there." The words echoed across the empty beach. Then her figure began to fade. "Mom, wait." I reached for her, but she disappeared. Then the dream ended.
I woke with a start.
The car swerved slightly before I corrected it. Liza glanced over. "You okay?" "Yeah," I forced a smile. "Just tired." I didn't tell her about the dream, but the warning stayed with me. Don't go there. The problem was that I had no choice. Not anymore. Whatever was happening had already found us. Running away wouldn't change that. We arrived in the late afternoon. The village looked almost exactly as I remembered. The same roads,
The same houses.
the same endless fields surrounding everything. But our property felt different. Abandoned. Unwelcome. As soon as we stepped out of the car, I noticed signs that someone or something had been there. The grass near the foundation had been disturbed. Mud covered parts of the porch. There were strange scratches on the wooden supports beneath the house. The front door was locked. The windows were intact. But yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Liza seemed to notice it too. "You feel that?" she asked quietly. "What?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing." But I knew exactly what she meant. The house felt occupied. The smell hit us the moment we entered. Rot, decay, something foul and damp. It lingered in every room. Furniture had been moved. Cabinets stood open. Drawers had been emptied onto the floor. The place looked as if someone had been searching for something. For hours we cleaned.
Swept floors.
Threw away garbage. Moved furniture back where it belonged. Slowly, the house began to look normal again. By evening, we were exhausted. But strangely enough, the atmosphere had improved. For the first time since arriving, it actually felt like home. We lit the grill outside.
Cooked dinner.
Talked about old memories. School. Friends. Our parents. Stories from childhood. For a few precious hours, we forgot about death and nightmares. Forgot about monsters. Forgot about fear. We laughed more that evening than we had in months. And for the first time since the accident, I saw genuine happiness in my sister's eyes. Looking back now, I realized that was probably the last peaceful moment of our lives. Shortly before midnight, we went to bed.
I locked every door.
checked every window, then checked them again. I wasn't sure why.
Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe something deeper. My room was exactly as I remembered from childhood. The same wallpaper, the same creaking floorboards, the same view of the trees outside. I lay awake for a long time, listening, waiting. Eventually sleep came. At some point during the night, a sound woke me. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My eyes opened. The room was dark. For several seconds, I simply listened. The noise came again. Scratch, 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 like claws dragging across wood. I sat up slowly. The sound seemed to come from beneath the floor. I checked my phone. 2:47 a.m. The scratching continued, slow, rhythmic, patient. Something was moving under the house. Something large. The sound continued for nearly 5 minutes, then suddenly stopped. Complete silence returned. I waited. Nothing happened. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted back to sleep. But even then, I couldn't shake one terrifying thought. Something down there knew we had come home, and it was listening. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache. My body felt heavy, as if I hadn't slept at all. When I entered the kitchen, I found Liza making breakfast. She looked terrible. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes. Her face was pale. "You look awful," I said.
She laughed weakly.
So do you. We sat down together. For a while, neither of us spoke.
Then she looked up. I had another nightmare. My stomach tightened. What happened? Her expression changed immediately. Fear returned to her eyes. And before she spoke, I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer.
Liza stared down at her coffee for several seconds before speaking.
Her hands were shaking. Not much, just enough for me to notice. "I dreamed about Mom and Dad," she said quietly. The words immediately put me on edge. "What happened?" She swallowed. "They were trying to warn me." A cold sensation crept through my chest. The same thing had happened to me. But I said nothing. Instead, I let her continue.
In the dream, they kept telling me to leave.
"Leave where? This house." Neither of us spoke for a moment. The kitchen suddenly felt much colder. "What else?" I asked. Liza looked toward the window, as if she expected someone to be standing outside. Then she continued. "At first it was just them. They were standing in the yard. They looked scared. Her voice trembled. They kept saying the same thing over and over. 'Leave. Run. Don't stay here.'"
I felt my stomach tighten.
The warning was almost identical to the one my mother had given me on the beach. But Liza still wasn't finished. Then everything changed. I already knew I wasn't going to like what came next. The dream shifted. She rubbed her arms nervously. I was suddenly inside the house. "Which house?" "This one." I didn't interrupt. I walked through the hallway and heard breathing. My pulse quickened.
Heavy breathing.
She looked directly at me, like something huge was nearby. The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. And then I found your room. A knot formed in my stomach. You were asleep. I felt every muscle in my body tense. There was something standing beside your bed. For a second, neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. "What kind of something?" I finally asked. Liza's face turned pale. Liza's face turned pale. The answer sounded simple,
but the fear in her voice told a different story.
it wasn't a person. She shook her head. It looked human at first, but it was too tall. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. How tall? Almost touching the ceiling. The room fell silent. I couldn't see its face, she continued. I couldn't see its face. It was standing near the window. What happened then? Her eyes widened slightly. As soon as it noticed me, I heard a growl. A memory flashed through my mind.
The growl from my dreams.
The one coming from the creature in the forest. The same impossible sound. The growl came from behind me, Liza whispered. I turned around. She stopped. For several seconds, she couldn't continue. What did you see? The color drained from her face. The old woman. My heart skipped a beat. The same old woman from your dreams? I almost asked. But I hadn't told her about those. Not yet. Not yet. She was smiling, Liza said.
A horrible smile.
The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Then she pointed toward your room. I waited. And Liza looked down. And there was something standing behind you. The silence that followed felt endless. What do you mean? There were two of them. A chill crawled down my spine. The shadow by the window, and another one behind your bed. Neither of us spoke.
Outside,
Wind rattled the branches against the house. For the first time since arriving, I genuinely wanted to leave. Pack everything. Get in the car. Drive until this place disappeared in the rearview mirror. But something held me there. A feeling, a certainty. The answers were close. Closer than ever. And I wasn't leaving without them. The rest of the day passed surprisingly normally. We cleaned the yard, repaired part of the fence.
removed old junk from the shed.
Nothing strange happened. No voices, no growls, no nightmares. By evening, I had almost convinced myself that fear was making us imagine things. Almost. Then my phone rang. It was my manager. The timing couldn't have been worse. Apparently, I had accidentally taken several important documents home earlier in the week. Documents they suddenly needed immediately. I explained that I was out of town. He didn't care. The company needed them.
Today. Not tomorrow.
Not next week. Today. Under normal circumstances, I would have refused. But he offered overtime pay and an extra day off. Eventually, I agreed. Eventually, the drive would only take a few hours. I could leave after dinner and return before midnight. Liza wasn't thrilled about the idea. "Do you really have to go?" "I'll be back before you know it." She forced a smile. "I'll survive." I tried to smile back. But something felt wrong.
A feeling I couldn't explain.
The same feeling I'd had before every nightmare. Before leaving, I walked through the house one last time. Every room. Every window. Every window. Every door. Everything looked normal. Liza stood on the porch watching me. "You know you're acting weird, right?" she said. I laughed. "Maybe. You're checking the house like we're in a horror movie. Maybe I watch too many horror movies." She rolled her eyes, then hugged me.
For a moment, I almost stayed.
Something deep inside screamed at me not to leave. Not tonight. Not now. But logic won. I got into the car and drove away. I had no idea it would be the biggest mistake of my life. The city was nearly dark when I arrived. I grabbed the documents, spent less than 30 minutes at the office, then headed back to the parking lot. That's when I remembered the message. Liza had texted me earlier. I hadn't read it yet.
Pulling out my phone,
I opened the conversation. The first line made my blood run cold. "Ruslan, please come back." My heart immediately began pounding. I kept reading. "I'm scared." The message continued. "After you left, I was cleaning outside. Then I noticed movement beneath the house. My hands started shaking. At first, I thought it was an animal. Then I saw two huge green eyes staring at me from the darkness. I felt sick. The message went on.
I ran inside and locked everything.
A few minutes later, something hit the floor from underneath. Hard. The entire house shook. I could barely breathe. The floor cracked. I saw the eyes again. My pulse hammered in my ears. I grabbed a knife and my phone. Then I climbed into the attic and locked the hatch. I reached the final lines, and everything inside me froze. It got inside. Ruslan. It's the same thing from my dream. The same creature. I can hear it walking through the house. I found Dad's old notebook. He wrote about this thing. Please hurry. Please. The message ended there. No more texts. No missed calls. Nothing. Nothing. For several seconds I sat frozen in the driver's seat. Then I slammed the car into gear and drove, and faster than I ever had in my life, because deep down I already knew something terrible had happened, and I was probably too late.
I don't remember much about the drive back. Only flashes. The road rushing beneath the headlights, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The message glowing on my phone. Please hurry. Again and again, those words replayed in my mind. Every minute felt like an hour. Every red light felt like torture. I kept telling myself I would make it in time. I had to. Liza was smart, resourceful. She knew how to hide. She would be okay. She had to be okay. The village appeared shortly after midnight. I barely slowed down. The tires sprayed gravel as I turned onto the dirt road leading to our property. Then I saw the house. My heart stopped. The front door high open. One side of the frame had been ripped apart. Not broken. Ripped. As though something immensely powerful had forced its way inside. I slammed on the brakes. The car hadn't even fully stopped before I jumped out. Liza. No answer. I ran toward the porch. The silence felt unnatural. Wrong. The entire property seemed dead. No insects, no wind, no distant barking dogs, nothing. Only silence. The moment I stepped inside, I smelled blood. Fresh blood. A lot of it. My stomach twisted. The living room looked like a battlefield. Furniture had been overturned. Glass covered the floor. Deep gouges marked the walls. Something enormous had torn through the house. And then I saw the hole. A massive hole in the floor. At least 6 feet wide. Large enough for a person to climb through. Or for something much larger to emerge. The darkness below seemed endless. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Liza! Still nothing. Then I noticed blood leading toward the attic ladder. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. No. No. Please no. I followed the trail. Each step felt heavier than the last. Darker. And then I saw her. She was lying near the base of the attic ladder. Motionless. Broken. The flashlight slipped from my hand. I dropped to my knees beside her. For several seconds I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. The world simply stopped. My little sister, the girl I promised to protect, the only family I had left, gone. I don't remember how long I sat there holding her. Minutes, maybe hours. Time no longer meant anything. All I knew was grief. Pure, crushing grief. And guilt. Overwhelming guilt. Because she had asked me to come back. And I hadn't been there. Eventually, another memory surfaced. The message. The notebook. Dad's notebook. Liza had mentioned finding it in the attic. Somewhere through the fog of sorrow, a single thought emerged. Find it. I gently laid her down and climbed the attic ladder. The attic was untouched. Whatever had happened down below, the creature apparently hadn't stayed here long. Moonlight filtered through a small window. Dust floated through the air. Everything looked ordinary, which somehow made it even worse. I searched frantically. Boxes, shelves, old furniture. Then finally I found it. A weathered notebook hidden behind an old cabinet. My father's handwriting covered the pages. I opened it and began to read. The first entries seemed normal. House repairs, work schedules, shopping lists. Then the tone changed. One entry immediately caught my attention. It had been written the day before my parents died. The handwriting looked rushed, uneven, almost panicked. The entry began, "If anyone finds this, I need them to know what happened." A chill ran through me. According to my father, everything had started years earlier. At the far edge of the village lived an old woman. Everyone knew her. Nobody liked her. Stories surrounded her. Some claimed she practiced witchcraft. Others believed she was simply insane. Most avoided her entirely. One night, my father caught her trespassing on our property. She had broken into the garage. She was searching through old boxes, looking for something. When he confronted her, she became furious. According to the journal, she claimed the land belonged to her family long ago. She insisted something important remained hidden somewhere on the property. My father threw her out. Before leaving, she turned and smiled. Then she said, "You'll regret this." At the time, he thought she was simply a bitter old woman. He couldn't have been more wrong. The next entries grew darker. Objects began disappearing. Animals vanished. Neighbors reported strange sounds beneath their homes. Then, the nightmares started. Not only for my father, for my mother too. Each dream featured the same old woman, the same warnings, the same threats. Then one night she appeared at our door, not in a dream, in reality. My father described every detail. The old woman stood on the porch smiling. Her eyes looked wrong, almost black. She spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather. Then she told him the truth, or what she claimed was the truth. She said she had summoned something, a servant, a creature that obeyed only her, something that lived underground, something that fed on fear and hatred and death. According to her, the creature had already killed before, and it would kill again. My father wrote that she laughed while describing it, as though she were proud, as though the monster were her child. The final line of the entry sent ice through my veins. She said, "It lives beneath our house." I looked up from the journal. The enormous hole in the floor downstairs suddenly made horrifying sense. The thing hadn't broken into the house. It had come home. The next pages were even worse. My father wrote about scratching beneath the floorboards, growls in the darkness, shadows moving outside windows at night. The creature was becoming stronger, bolder. Every week it came closer. Every week the sounds grew louder. And then, near the end of the journal, I found the final entry. The last thing my father ever wrote. It was short, desperate, and terrifying. According to a local occult expert, the creature wasn't an animal. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't even human. It was something ancient, something summoned through blood sacrifice. The expert claimed there was only one way to destroy it. Fire. Lots of fire. And holy water. The creature had to burn with it. Otherwise, it would simply return, again and again and again, until everyone connected to the property was dead. The final sentence was underlined 3 times. If you are reading this, do not hesitate. Burn the house. I closed the notebook. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, a low growl echoed through the night. And for the first time, I understood exactly what I had to do. Even if it killed me. For a long time, I sat in the attic, holding my father's journal. The pages trembled in my hands. Not because of the cold, because of what they contained. Everything suddenly made sense. The nightmares, the old woman, the creature, my parents' deaths, Liza, all of it. The thing beneath the house had never left. It had been waiting, growing stronger. patiently feeding on fear and grief. And now, it had taken everyone. Everyone except me. A low growl echoed from somewhere below. The sound snapped me back to reality. The creature was still here. I carefully closed the journal and slipped it into my jacket. Then I listened. Silence. For several seconds, nothing moved. No footsteps, no scratching, no breathing. Then, crack. Wood splintered downstairs, followed by a wet, tearing sound. I immediately knew what it was doing. Feeding. My stomach twisted. The monster was still feeding. Rage flooded through me so suddenly that it almost erased my fear. Almost. I wanted to run downstairs. I wanted to grab the nearest weapon and tear the thing apart. But my father's final words stopped me. Burn the house. That was the only way. Not revenge, not bravery. Climbed out through the attic window. A large oak tree stood close enough to the roof that I could reach one of its branches. But eventually my feet touched the ground. The night air felt freezing against my skin. The house stood silent behind me. Too silent. As if it knew I was outside. Watching. Waiting. I forced myself not to look back. Instead, I sprinted toward the garage. Inside, I found exactly what I needed. Gasoline. Several old containers. More than enough. My father had always kept extra fuel for equipment around the property. Now it was going to save my life. I wasn't sure which. I loaded every container into a wheelbarrow and pushed them back toward the house. Halfway there, I froze. Something moved behind one of the windows. A shadow. Large. Unnaturally large. It disappeared before I could focus on it. The growl returned. This time, closer. Much closer. I realized something terrifying. The creature knew what I was planning. My hands shook as I poured the gasoline. Around the porch. Along the walls. Across every wooden surface I could reach. The smell filled the air. Sharp and overwhelming. The entire house became a giant bomb waiting for a spark. Still no sign of the creature, which somehow felt worse. Predators were most dangerous when you couldn't see them. When the last container was empty, I stepped back. The lighter felt tiny in my hand. A ridiculous little thing, yet it held enough power to destroy everything. The house, the creature, the final piece of my childhood. For a moment, I hesitated. Every memory I had of my family lived inside those walls. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer evenings, Mom cooking in the kitchen, Dad fixing things in the garage. All of it would disappear, forever. Then I remembered finding my sister on the floor. The hesitation vanished. I flicked the lighter. A small flame appeared. The wind tried to kill it. Failed. I threw it. The fire exploded to life. Flames raced across the gasoline like living creatures. Within seconds, the porch was burning. Then the walls. Then the roof. Orange light illuminated the darkness. The house groaned as the wood began to crack and warp. Smoke billowed into the sky. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the screaming started. Not human screaming. Something far worse. Something ancient. Something furious. The creature had realized what was happening. The front door exploded outward. A massive shape burst through the flames. I finally saw it clearly, and wished I hadn't. The thing stood nearly 9 feet tall. Its body was skeletal and twisted. Patches of diseased flesh hung from its frame. Long arms dragged near the ground. Its head looked almost human, almost. The eyes were completely black. The mouth stretched far too wide. Rows of jagged teeth filled its jaws, and from between them hung a long, dark tongue. The same creature from my nightmares. The same creature Liza had seen. The same creature that had destroyed my family. It was real, and it was looking directly at me. The monster roared. Then it charged. Fast. Far faster than something that size should have been able to move. I barely had time to react. My father's journal had mentioned holy water. I pulled the bottle from my backpack. The creature closed half the distance. I uncapped it. The monster lunged. I threw the entire bottle into its face. For one horrible second, nothing happened. Then the creature screamed. Its flesh began smoking. The skin around its eyes blistered instantly. The monster stumbled backward, clawing at its own face, howling in pain. The sound was deafening. I didn't waste the opportunity. I grabbed another container of gasoline, the last one, and emptied it directly onto the creature. The thing tried to recover, tried to stand, tried to reach me, but it was already burning, already weakening. I picked up a long wooden pole lying near the fence. The creature lunged again. I drove the pole forward with every ounce of strength I had left. The impact pushed it backward, straight into the flames. The monster disappeared into the burning doorway, and then the entire front section of the house collapsed. The scream that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't merely pain. It was rage, pure hatred. The sound echoed across the fields, across the village, across the night itself. Then suddenly, silence. The fire continued burning, but the screaming stopped. The growling stopped. Everything stopped. For the first time in months, I felt nothing. No fear, no pressure, no presence watching me. The thing was gone. I stayed until sunrise, watching the house burn into ruins, watching the place where my family had lived become ashes, watching the nightmare end, or at least hoping it had ended. When the first light appeared over the horizon, I finally turned away. The monster was dead. The house was gone. But the cost had been unbearable. I had won, and lost everything. The fire burned until sunrise. I sat in my car at the edge of the property and watched the last pieces of my childhood collapse into glowing ruins. The house was gone, the monster was gone, and so was my family. For the first time in months, there were no growls, no whispers, no feeling that something was lurking just beyond sight. Only silence. A terrible, empty silence. The police arrived shortly after dawn. Someone in the village had seen the flames and called emergency services. By then, there was little left to save. The firefighters spent hours soaking the ruins, while investigators searched the property. I already knew what they would find. Nothing. At least nothing they would understand. No evidence of an ancient creature, no proof of the old woman's curse, no signs of the nightmare that had destroyed my family. Only ashes and tragedy. The questioning lasted for days. Where had I been? When had I arrived? Why hadn't I called emergency services sooner? Did I know what caused the fire? I told them a version of the truth, the only version anyone would believe. I explained that Liza had sent me a message saying someone, or something, was trying to break into the house. I rushed back. When I arrived, the building was already burning. That was all. Anything beyond that would have sounded insane. A monster living beneath the foundation? A dead witch? Nightmares that caused real injuries? No one would have believed me. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted them to. Several weeks passed, then months. Life became a blur of paperwork, funeral reports, insurance claims, lawyers, meetings, signatures, endless signatures. Every day felt mechanical. Wake up, exist, sleep, repeat. I moved away shortly afterward. Far away. A different city. A different apartment. A different life. Or at least I tried to build one. The nightmares stopped immediately. That was the strangest part. The very first night after the fire, I slept peacefully. No forest, no cabin, no old woman, no creature, nothing. Just darkness and rest. The same thing happened the next night, and the night after that. Weeks passed, then months. Still nothing. It was over. The thing was truly gone. I wanted to believe that. Sometimes, I dreamed about Liza. But those dreams were different. They weren't frightening. She would appear somewhere peaceful. A beach, a field, a quiet road beneath a summer sky. She always looked happy, healthy, alive. And she always told me the same thing. It wasn't your fault. The first time I heard those words, I woke up crying. The second time too. Eventually, the dreams became easier. Because I learned to live with it. There is a difference.
Nearly a year passed before the final mystery revealed itself. It happened on a rainy evening. I had just returned home from work, A package was waiting outside my apartment door. No return address, no shipping label, nothing. Just a plain cardboard box. At first, I assumed it had been delivered by mistake, but my name was written across the top, in faded black ink. I carried it inside and opened it. The moment I saw what was inside, my blood turned to ice.
It was my father's journal.
The same journal I had left behind. The same journal that should have been destroyed in the fire. Yet there it was, undamaged, perfectly intact, as though it had never been near the flames. For several minutes, I simply stared. Then I noticed something else. The journal looked thicker than before, much thicker, as if new pages had been added. Slowly, I opened it. The familiar entries appeared first. Everything I had already read.
The old woman.
The creature. The curse. The fire. Then I reached a section I had never seen before. The handwriting wasn't my father's. It was older, much older, much older, and the first sentence nearly stopped my heart. If you are reading this, then the beast has died. I felt my pulse quicken. The pages that followed described the creature, not as a demon, not as a monster, not as a servant, a guardian. Something created to protect a hidden object buried beneath the land long before the village existed. The old woman hadn't summoned it. She had controlled it. There was a difference. A very important difference. Because according to the journal, killing the guardian did not destroy the curse. It only removed the lock. The final pages explained that whenever the guardian died, something worse eventually woke beneath the earth. Something older. Something far hungrier. Something that even the old woman had feared. My hands trembled as I turned to the last page. There was only one sentence, written in shaky black ink, fresh ink, as though it had been written recently, maybe even days earlier. The sentence read, "It knows you survived." A loud knock echoed through my apartment. 3 slow knocks from the front door. My blood froze. Nobody knew I was home. Nobody was expecting me. The knock came again, 3 times, slow.
Silence.
Deliberate. Then silence. I looked toward the door, and for the first time in almost a year, I felt that familiar presence, watching, waiting, smiling. The end, or perhaps the beginning.